Just so you know, we have been told the first selection of the cavalcade has left Minffordd, but I've just heard a whistle in the distance now. The collection of quirks and curiosities, this veritable zoo of mechanical marvels, white elephants, iron horse and steel dinosaurs, is trundling down the tracks as we speak from Minffordd to here at Harbour Station. You can hear that above my droning voice. It is painted bright yellow. It is like a little train from Toyland, a theme park, if you will. Heading down the tracks is one of my own personal favourites. It's wrong to have a favourite, but this is surely one of mine. This has originally come from the Isle of Man. It now lives at the Amberley Living Museum in Sussex. This is Polar Bear, with its very, very small wheels, and you can imagine being in that cab right now is not only loud, it's very, very warm, and probably not very pleasant. This is a Bagnall of 1896, and in fantastic working order.
Like I say, these engines, it had a sister, a Sea Lion. The two of them worked on the Growdell Glen Railway from the 1890s and 1905 when this one was built through till the early 1960s, and they really were fairground engines. You don't often think of railways and fairgrounds. Like we said, the livery there, the bright yellow, is actually quite tame compared to the livery this engine finished its working life as. I have a crossover interest into the world of steam traction engines, and it can be said that Polar Bear finished its life more akin to a steam showman's engine, with blue, red and yellow, and a lot of people said how horrible it looked. I have to confess I thought it looked fantastic. However, the guys at Growdell are resisting all temptation that I keep putting in their way of offering to buy paint to put it into those colours.
Growdell Glen, this little engine, I think came to my first notice on a lovely television programme called The Train Now Departing, and this little engine was tootling about at the back of the shed in that programme. The railway over on Growdell Glen is now fundraising for its own replica, a similar one of this called Brown Bear. So if you go online after this, we'll donate to see another one of these engines. They are fundraising at the moment to have a third one of these, so Brown Bear, after another item of the zoo that this railway should have gone to meet. Locotracteur, which is a 1925 French locomotive built for the War Office. This, again, has been brought up from Richmond Light Railway in Kent, a bit like Chicken Tikka round behind us.
You can't call it that. They did.
It's come up on a low loader. And again, one of the things that marks this gala is the generosity of people and the generosity of locomotive owners and crews and the teams who've come with them. So again, the team have brought Locotracteur with them, and this particular item was found frequently in the First World War in and amongst the trenches. These were very light machines built for carrying troops and, of course, ammunition to and from the front line to ensure that there was victory on one side. Locotracteur has been restored to an incredibly high standard.
As with many of these things, you know, we talked about the rebuild of Andy, but Locotracteur, going back, you know, a lot of people call diesels and petrols modern image, modern traction, and yet you forget that the internal combustion engine has been around and in use for almost as long as the steam locomotive. But crossover into the different types of technology, the restoration of this engine was undertaken in Spain by a company that specialises in the restoration of Bugatti motor cars, and that will be especially evident in the bodywork and the brass fuel tank, the engine rebuild that it's had to have taken place. You know, a really, really rare piece of machinery, and certainly there are no others like this in England.
Next up, it is Fernley. Fernley, as you've noticed, if you've seen these around the station before, it's a vertical boiler locomotive, an 040 plus tender. This is very similar to a locomotive that was also here at the first Quirks Gala several years ago, very similar to Paddy. But this is a brand new build vertical boiler locomotive. It's been running at various railways, and I believe is currently for sale. So if any of you on the platform wish to possess a two-for-gauge locomotive, please make an offer to the driver when he comes in. I'm not allowed one.
I won't tell, Tim. But you can start the bidding. Because that's another part of the fun that you'll see with some of the other quirks that come across this afternoon. And we say the whole epitome of it is that word fun. Fernley has no other purpose. It was built to be enjoyed. It's one of a number of small engines, quite often vertical boilers. You'll see Perseverance as well if it's made it across. Engines that people make just for the pleasure of it.
I mean, it is ridiculous. This is a ridiculous engine.
But then again, it's been doing Stirling service this weekend on the Minffordd shuttle, so it does work, and it works hard, and it works well.
It's a lovely beat to it, and as it comes up the platform, you'll hear it chuff along. It's a lovely beat, a lovely sound to it. It's a very efficient locomotive, and it does absolutely brilliant Stirling service work for short-haul work, for which it was built. This is Samson, which has come all the way across from Beamish Open Air Museum. Many of you are familiar with Beamish. Really, it's a living museum, and this is a scratch-built locomotive, as so many of the quirks here today are. It is a little bit more than trundling across the cob. I believe on its footplate is Matt Ellis and Paul Jarman of Beamish Open Air Museum. Paul was instrumental in having this machine built from plans that it had rescued from archives.
Yeah, Samson itself is actually a replica. We talked about replicas and rebuilds. It's a replica of an 1874 engine built by the Stephen Lewin Company of Poole in Dorset. It looks like nothing else that you will see today. It looks like a mini traction engine on railway wheels. It's got the cylinder on top of the engine, and the flywheel and the gear drive. And you know, it was able to be able to drive static machinery when it wasn't pulling trains, and it worked in lead mines in Frosterley in County Durham. Again, not a million miles from where I live now, but didn't last very long. Once the mines had closed, the engine vanished after a working life of about 30 years. So often the way of the world with railway engines, you know, we celebrate them, we venerate them, but at the end of it all, they're really bits of plant to do a job. We've seen a piece of plant in Andy, the Simplex. We've seen the other end of the spectrum with Samson. Samson is... Paul Jarman on the footplate has written a very good book about it recently, The Book of Samson. But it details the construction of the engine, plus also its history. And it was really built by one man, a chap called Dave Young, who is one of the volunteers at Beamish, a very, very fine craftsman, made his own patterns for the castings. The boiler was made at the Severn Valley Railway. The wheels were tired. The tyres were put on at Statfold, but the majority of that engine was built at Beamish by Dave Young. It's been fitted with a tender for this weekend, tender based on the 18-inch gauge engines that you'll see, or used to see, at Horwich Works. We have one of the original Horwich Works engines at the National Railway Museum at York. You can come and see it in our entrance hall. And Paul and Dave have copied the tender off that engine wren. I can't see if it's got a wagon with it as well, but it has been displayed with a typical wagon from the Cornish Hush lead mine.
Samson is very much the kind of thing that happens if you lock a man in a shed for several years.
The amazing thing with Dave Young, who built the engine, is that he's managed to do so many other things as well as building Samson. So he's built stationary engines, he's overhauled stuff, and continues to work very hard to maintain Beamish's collection.
We appear to have a motorcycle display team heading down the tracks towards us in formation.
That can only mean one thing: it has to be the Panther wagon, which, other than the Whistling Pig, has to be my favourite of the daft things this weekend.
And there are lots of daft things here today.
That's including us too. That's enough of the quips. The Panther wagon is one of those things that I probably would have done if I'd had access to the right facilities and a workshop.
Thank God you haven't.
Got me in severe trouble. I can do no better really than summarise what it says in the Quirks guide, which if you haven't got the Quirks guide, I would advise you, everything is listed in there, and it's a very fine piece of publishing, but it refers to the Panther wagon. So it was built by a group of teenagers who were at Bolton School and were volunteers on the deviation, and they weren't impressed by the way of having to access the site by pushing a slate wagon. So they built a motorised truck to make things easier, using a Panther 350 motorbike and a flat truck from a brickworks near Wigan.
It's together for the Port Maddock Motorcycle Display Team. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the Lister Auto Truck. Taking a considered approach to Port Maddock Station.
Every minute that we were doing this commentary, you sit there and think, I've just gone and said about the smallest or the largest or whatever, and we thought Spondon was small, but actually the auto truck is even smaller, and like we were saying, it's probably the smallest real commercially built locomotive. It's a derivative of the Lister auto truck. And,
it's pretty much just a seat on wheels with an engine.
With a petrol engine, yeah.
But a lovely seat.
You tried it?
It's a lovely seat for about 5 minutes.
The Lister auto truck was used heavily in factories, warehouses, for moving goods around, and it was logical progression to put a road-going vehicle, which you'll see an auto truck in the car park outside Harbour Station, one that's done John O'Groats to Land's End, which must have been an almighty challenge. I've got friends who've done it on a steamroller. I thought that was bad enough. But the rail truck is the logical progression of the auto truck onto rails, like we said before with the Simplexes and Rustons. Very easy to start, very easy to look after, easy to maintain, though I probably still couldn't manage it because it's the Infernal Confusion engine. But the sort of thing that would have moved 1 or 2 skip wagons around a sewage works, around a brickworks. In fact, this one was from the Enfield Middlesex Red Brick Company.
Yeah, this was built in 1936 and actually has some parts from an engine down the coast from the Fairbourne Railway, from Whippet Quick, which was again a very small engine used on the Seaside Miniature Railway, Pitterminch Gauge Railway, and parts of that have been used in this. And here comes the Lister auto truck.
Leaving a bow wave of blue smoke behind it. It's not quite the Baltic Fleet, but what a fabulous thing. And again, nice to give due prominence to something that was once the backbone of industry.
The Galloping Goose.
Yeah, the Galloping Goose has a long history. It's a legend within the narrow gauge world. More often with the narrow gauge railways of Colorado, the Durango, Silverton, Denver and Rio Grande. And of course, the Galloping Goose was never really seen in this country, but this is Statfold's homage to the Galloping Goose. It's built on a Morris chassis, there's various other commercial vehicle components to it, and it is great fun.
It's very, very silly, and I like it an awful lot. That's been going up and down shuttles, hasn't it, to on the Welsh Highland?
It has, yeah, we've missed it, unfortunately. Everyone says you should get a ride on it, so by us not getting a ride on it, we hope that you have.
Behind that is the Davenport, which is a very unusual locomotive imported from the States.
Yeah, well, initially the Davenport was exported from the States and went to have a working life in India, in the sugar mills. It's a very unusual make in the UK. I don't think there are any other Davenport engines. This one was a quirk in its own way, in that when its working life was finished, it was laid aside in India and ended up with a tree growing through it. Now, I don't think the Statfold Barn wanted to enter it for Chelsea, so they took it apart and gave it a painstaking restoration. Statfold have a reputation across the country for some of the most painstaking but also the quickest restorations that I've ever seen. That engine, I think, was back in steam from its derelict state in less than 2 years.
Now, Statfold have a huge collection of locomotives and bits of rolling stock. I think well over 30 or 40 on site.
Yeah, and the steam gala they had at the end of March, they were able to put 20 narrow gauge locos in steam. I think that's unprecedented anywhere else in the UK. We have forgotten another little engine here on site, coupled to the Davenport. It's so small you might think the Davenport's sitting on it. It's the little de Coeville four-wheel tank engine with the, I'm told, unpronounceable name, so I'm going to try Chiquitanta.
Chiquintica.
Sounds a bit like an ABBA song, but I'm sure the owner will not forgive us for that. A very, very pretty little engine imported to the UK from South America by a private collector in Kent who runs the Richmond Light Railway. Again, an absolute dream of a restoration. If you get a chance to have a look at that engine, have a look at the paint, have a look at the finish on that paintwork, the lining and the depth on that varnish. You could shave by the reflection. It's fantastic.
Look at the varnish on that.
We did mention earlier that Diana is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year and has been all over the place, starting its life with the Kerry tramway, the timber tramway in mid-Wales. We recreated scenes of its life as timber work at Beamish Museum last month, where the engine was used to carry timber from a saw bench run by a Marshall steam traction engine, whose crew are standing on the platform, so I shall embarrass them. She's waving, hello. And then we're converted to small timber from another saw bench run by another traction engine, the sort of work that Diana would have done day in, day out. But as I say, it is the engine's 100th anniversary this year. You'll see it's wearing a very natty brass headboard on the front of the smoke box at the current time. Phil, have you got any of the badges left? Thank you. Yeah, Phil Mason, who owns Diana, has had a limited edition of brass badges done, which copies of the headboard you see with the engine, £3.50. Do see him, stop one and buy him. Stop him and buy one, and he'd be very happy. And of course, proceeds will go to support the restoration of that engine, which I think is a very fine achievement by Phil and many friends and the Vale of Rydal Railway, whose workshop it was completed at.